then you can see that we've been joined here in studio by Dale Vince, of course, known to many, Forest Green Rovers chairman and owner, but of course has lent his support in recent weeks and months to the ongoing Just Stop Oil protests, which periodically emerge and disrupt various sports, all in a bid to further their cause. The group campaigns for an immediate end to new fossil fuel investments, and over the weekend they tweeted following an interesting situation at the British Grand Prix, to say the least, when protesters interrupted the event. They then tweeted, "If you're more outraged about this disruption than our world being burnt before our eyes, then you need to get your priorities straight." And I would have thought the man who's joined us in studio, Dale Vince, would agree with that. Dale, good morning to you.
Yeah, morning, Jim. Morning, Simon.
Morning, Dale.
Do you know what? I think they put that really well, actually. I mean, that sums it up perfectly.
You're happy with that? That's why they disrupted the British Grand Prix at the weekend, because they say if you're more outraged about this disruption than our world being burnt before our eyes, you've got to get your priorities straight.
Yeah, no, I think they put that perfectly. You know, I mean, disruption is disruption. We've talked about it before, haven't we, Jim? You know, like was it the Everton game? Somebody tied themselves to a goalpost and caused this disruption. And you know, what I've said before is you can't have effective protest without disruption. It's about bringing attention to a really important issue. You called it their cause earlier on. I would say it's everybody's cause. We've got to stop drilling for oil and gas. We've got to stop burning it ultimately, and very soon. We've got to make the transition to green energy, because climate change is real. The climate crisis is upon us, and we've got a few years to deal with it.
But is sport the right platform on which to do this, on which to protest?
I'm not sure there's a wrong platform, actually. Because, you know, what we need to do is bring attention to the lack of action from our government and the urgent need to do something, because not just for us either, it's for future generations. What we're doing now will endure for decades.
The last time we spoke about this with you, Dale, was around and about the protests that we saw happening in football, when protesters went on and handcuffed themselves to goalposts. We had you on and we said to you, and I didn't know, I said to you, who's funding this? Who's behind them?
Yeah,
and you surprised us all by saying, well, I am. Were you behind this at the weekend at the British Grand Prix?
No, I wasn't. No, I read about it in the papers the day before. The police had some intel. They thought it might happen. They asked them not to do it, and then that's the first I'd heard about it.
I mean, it caused mayhem, did it not? I mean, race winner Carlos Sainz said afterwards, I thought the red flag went up. I saw 3 guys running towards me. People have the opportunity to speak out because it's their right, but I don't believe jumping into a Formula One track is the best way to do it. You put yourself and the drivers at risk. You've got to be more careful, because you could get killed and generate an accident.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. You can't argue with that. It was just over 100 years ago that the suffragettes disrupted a horse racing event. Somebody jumped out in front of a horse, got killed, unfortunately. And this was a protest about the fact that women didn't have a vote in our country. That was effective.
Simon, is that a fair comparison?
If you're running the argument that Dale is, probably yes. I mean, listen, I believe that climate activists are moving into the world of eco-terrorism. I believe that there's boundaries that you push up against, whether it's... I think they're irresponsible, I think they're reckless, and I think they're dangerous. And the challenge for me is, as I watch the blockading of oil refineries, I watch the gluing onto roads, or the running onto racetracks, and I think there's an element of recklessness about it. And I think the challenge for me is that, by their very admission, and Dale being here today, the oxygen is the attention they get from the media. And my preference, because I'm a person of integrity, would be not to discuss this subject matter, because the very thing that they're getting is this moment in time here.
But you would say,
so if this was my platform, I wouldn't have
absolutely.
them here.
No, absolutely. And we've had this conversation before, when you told me last time that the protest had failed, the Everton protest, and I was like, and yet here we are on Sport talking about it. So I get your point, absolutely.
No, I didn't say it failed. I said I didn't agree with
you
it.
You said it didn't work. You said it didn't work, which is the same thing. But look,
I don't think I did.
Yesterday, was it? A couple of guys glued themselves to a Turner in the National Gallery. A different kind of protest.
Sure.
Didn't put anybody in danger. And the day before that, there was a different kind of road protest. I don't know if you read about it, but some people...
Driving slowly.
Drove slowly down the motorway, protesting over fuel prices.
Fuel prices, isn't it?
Yeah, fuel prices. That's interesting. I wonder where you stand on that. Is that okay?
I think protest, I don't disagree with protests. I think the fundamental right to protest, you have to have a level of disruption. Of course you do. By the very nature of the right to protest, by the very nature of the Public Order Act of 1986, people have a right to protest. But I think there are boundaries. And I think that we are now getting to the territory where those boundaries are being pushed over, And you'll argue that that's because there's a need to do it. And I'll argue that there is an element of undemocratic positioning about what people are doing. And I'll argue about the fact that there's irresponsibility and recklessness of it. And I'll also argue against the fact that if it were my platform, I wouldn't give you the audience. The challenge is you've got precisely what you want. You're here. Right. And this is the more the media give you attention, the more these stunts will get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's the byproduct of the media. And the very oxygen that you want, you've got.
Sure. But look, the recklessness here is the destruction of our planet by unfettered fossil fuel consumption and commercial interest, which is affecting the future of everybody on the planet to make profits for a few. That shouldn't be allowed. That's undemocratic as well.
I'm not going to debate you on climate issues, Dale, because you spend your life buried in that situation. If I want to spend my life buried in it, then I'll give you a riposte. But what I do believe is there is an appropriate way to protest.
I made a point about democracy.
It is not about... Well, yes, the government was elected the government was elected on a particular protocol. We elect governments democratically. They were elected on the basis of net zero by 2030. People want that changed. The agenda's moved. That's not democracy, that's a slightly different dynamic. But here's the point. This is your area of expertise. I'm talking about the right to protest. I believe, from my position, that I have an integrity about my view. I think that the line is being pushed over by protesters. Yeah. And you're getting your oxygen. So I'd actually prefer to abstain from this conversation because I'm not overly interested in it.
Give me a chance to speak then.
Lewis Hamilton said
it's not
after
a one-way transaction deal.
Lewis Hamilton said after the race, big up those guys, big up the protesters. I love that people are fighting for the planet and we need more people like them. And then Mercedes later put out a statement, Lewis was endorsing their right to protest but not the method that they chose, which compromised their safety and that of others. I mean, Dale, when it gets to it, the safety of anyone, including the protesters, should not be compromised at any time, should it?
But the safety of everybody on the planet and everybody in this country in particular is put in jeopardy right now by commercial interests, by the making of profits by a few, at the absolute jeopardy of everybody else. You know, the unfettered mining and burning of fossil fuels now is reckless because the science tells us very clearly the climate crisis is here. We have to stop burning fossil fuels. Otherwise, our planet will become uninhabitable. The consequences are immense. You know, we're talking a refugee crisis that will put all previous refugee crises in the shade. You know, we're talking about parts of the world that we can't live in. We're talking about floods. We're talking about wildfires. You know, we've seen record temperatures year on year now for the last handful of years. You know, it's happening before our eyes. We have to stop fossil fuels. And if governments won't listen and won't do something about it, then it's our duty, actually, to future generations to get out there and do something about it ourselves.
But is this the right thing, Dale? This is what I keep on coming back to. Is this the right thing? Disrupting a major sporting event when people's safety is put at risk and seriously put at risk.
Yeah.
People are fed up with seeing these protests. Many people who go... The vast majority of the people who are at Silverstone want to see the race. Yeah. They don't want to see these guys run on the track.
Yeah, they got the race, didn't they? They got to see the race. I would say the guys that did this were very brave, actually. I think the risk to the drivers was minimal. You saw the huge accident that the Chinese driver was involved in, and the halo saved his life. I think colliding with a person... is not going to probably have much impact on the driver at all. But there was a risk, and, you know, they put themselves at much greater risk than the drivers. They caused a little bit of disruption. Listen, what else can we do? The government's not listening. Government's not doing the right thing.
The government are listening, and if you're looking at the public...
But they're not.
Well, they are. Yeah, they're just not listening the way you think they should. If you look at the public, we've got a cost of living crisis, so that people can't even feed themselves. So this generation that can't even feed themselves, we might not be around for the Armageddon that you're forecasting. If you look at the public's reaction to net zero, when you ask the public's perception of net zero, the majority of them are in favour of it. And when you talk to them and you then frame it in a situation with how they're going to be affected and how it's going to impose upon their lives, then the support diminishes. So we have to get the balance between advancing a very noble cause and making people aware of it, which people are incredibly aware of it, and pushing up against the boundaries of what you perceive to be your right to operate in a certain way because of your pursuit of the outcomes that you believe are right. And you have the right to have a view, and I have a right to have an alternate view.
Yeah, of course you do. Listen, I've seen no evidence to support what you've just said. The support from people for us to get to net zero, to move to renewable energy, that is overwhelming.
Well,
that is
domain,
clear.
Bill.
But I've never seen anything that says, but when it comes to the consequences, people back away from that. What consequences do you mean?
The studies.
What consequences?
The consequences are the cost implications of pursuing certain policies. When it's framed in a certain way, without consequence, with the vantage point of net zero being something good and people subscribing to the view, you have a very strong support base place. When you start to frame it with the cost implications behind it, people's support for it diminishes, and that is a study that's out there in the public domain. So go look it up yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, who published it?
It might have been Nielsen. That's off the top of my head. I can't remember because I was given it by one of the news outlets.
But look, there is actually no need for there to be a cost to get to net zero. In fact, the cost will come if we don't get to net zero. The impact on our economy. I mean, world famous economists have said it will cost us more not to avoid the climate crisis than it will to let it happen. So if you look at this properly, you'll see that it's cheaper to act, to switch to green energy, and in the process clean up the air we breathe and the water and the land and everything else, than it is to just... I mean, the government want to give licenses now to 40 new oil fields in the North Sea. I can't even believe there's a decision to be made about opening a coal mine in Cumbria, for God's sake, a coal mine.
Dale, I understand all that, and I understand that you are so passionate about it, and you believe that every word you say is right, and I'm not faulting you for that, but it's a sporting arena. You can imagine the vast majority of the people at that Grand Prix at the weekend said, "What are these idiots doing?"
But they've got what they wanted, Jim.
But Dale, that's what we wanted.
No, I accept
but
that.
It.
I accept that. But look, Simon's point, I don't accept at all, because we can get to 100% green electricity without a cost at all. Onshore wind and solar need no public money. They're being built at parity with the grid. We're building them ourselves. So this idea that it's expensive to do this is nonsense.
You're lobbying football all the time. Are you getting anywhere by lobbying football? Do you have backing?
Yeah, I mean, football's moving this way. The EFL have begun something called the Green Club Initiative, and I think most of the clubs in the EFL have signed up to it. And if you look around the world of sport is moving this way. I mean, the world is moving this way, right? People increasingly want more done. There's a frustration in the general population that we're not doing more. And this energy price and cost of living crisis that we have is not caused by renewable energy. It's caused by fossil fuels. And therefore, doubling down to get more fossil fuels out of the North Sea to wring the last drops out makes no sense. Because it can't help the price.
But we're debating the manner in which you do it. We're not debating the right to do it. I'm in the exact space that you are, which you have a right to do it, but I believe the manner in which you're doing it is reckless and dangerous and irresponsible.
No, you've said that.
I haven't finished yet.
Yeah,
you believe...
But you're saying it multiply.
Well, but that's fine, but I'm reinforcing the point. I can construct sentences as I
want
to.
Old.
I'd like to listen to you and endure your observations.
But the point I'm making is it doesn't cost money to get to net zero.
I've got that. You just said that, so you're repeating yourself.
Dale, just to get this right, you back the protests 100%. You see nothing wrong in it, and you call the protesters brave, fearless, and you back them all the time.
I see the danger, I see the disruption, but I don't think there's a protest that I probably wouldn't back. But let's see if they come up with one.
Many messages coming in. I'm looking at one here. Dale just said sport is supporting the cause. Sport is on board. Clubs have signed up. So why don't the protesters choose another platform? Why target sport if sport's already on board?
Well, Formula One, I'm not sure is particularly on board, and it is a fairly kind of polluting form of sport. And I mean, it's a global circus, racing in 20 different countries of the world, flying everywhere. Do you know what I mean? It's the peak of carbon in sport, probably.
You must think that Lewis Hamilton is the ultimate hypocrite, then, isn't he?
Well, I might not say that, Simon, but he did have a private jet until a couple of years ago, and I thought that was a bit questionable.
Doesn't pay his taxes in this country, which would contribute towards the outcomes that we want.
I saw that as well, and actually I share that view.
You say sports on board, football is on board, but give me hard and fast examples. You mentioned the EFL and this campaign, but a hard and fast example of backing from a football club, a major football club in the Premier League.
Backing for what? The Just Stop Oil?
The cause. Yeah, Just Stop Oil.
Nah, it doesn't exist.
Climate change. You say football's on board with it. Why have I not seen a Premier League club with across the front of their shirts, Just Stop Oil?
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe they haven't got the tens of millions that would cost. But what I was actually saying, Jim, was that football's moving this way. Football is embracing the climate agenda. Clubs, organisations, FIFA, UEFA, they're all making changes. FIFA have committed to the next World Cup being net zero, which is an incredible ambition, for example. So sport is moving this way. The public are moving this way. The world is moving this way, is what I said. But I don't.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair observation.
Did you just say F1 should be scrapped? Incidentally,
I don't think I did.
Somebody they're listening to your every word at the moment, Simon. I interrupted you. On you go.
No, but I think Dale is right that people are moving towards this direction. But I think the support that Dale thinks he's got in this country isn't there. I think people have a view on it. I think the government has a view on it. In their manifesto of 2019, they talked about getting to a net zero position by 2050. And the commitment to that was unequivocal in their manifesto. That's been adjusted by climate activists that believe that needs to be changed, and I understand the dynamic. The only difference between myself and Dale is that he believes that the extreme activism is appropriate, and I believe that it's not. And I do not believe emphatically that the majority of this country supports it. They support the narrative of a safer, better world.
Yeah.
But there are other ways to get to this position, and certainly in this activism front, I do not believe that the country as a whole, as a matter of course, supports it.
So you support the cause, Simon, but not the nature of the protest.
And I'm in the camp. I think they're idiots. I think they're reckless and irresponsible. And I know you disagree with me, and of course I understand it. But this is what they want. This is the oxygen, and by their very own admission, the very nature, and they will do next. But they will chain themselves to a goalpost or to an umpire's leg or whatever else it is, because it gets Dale Vince on a platform, which is a sports platform, talking about a subject matter.
I don't think that's what they want. I don't think they did it for me. I think you guys
but you
reached
are
out
a
and
very
asked me to come and
articulate,
speak.
educated spokesperson that puts it across in a far more erudite way than most of the people that I see sitting on television.
But in a very calm way, Dale, you kind of stoke the fire. I'm with Simon in that. Of that, there is no doubt. I mean, I hope I'm not inviting this to happen. I'm sure it won't happen. But if a group of them came to you today to say, look, Dale, we need a bit of funding. You need to help me pay for tickets for Centre Court and Wimbledon because I'm going to go out and handcuff myself to the umpire's chair. Would you do it?
I think I probably would. I don't see any great harm in that, do you? It's not reckless and dangerous. It's disruptive. That's the point.
So you would finance that? You would get behind them?
Yeah, I think I would, yeah.
Well, then Wimbledon wouldn't sell the other tickets, would they? With that in mind.
Dale, is it all... many people get involved in this discussion. John's a Derby fan. I've just picked this out. I agree with both Simon, but I also agree with Dale. So Jim asked Dale, what are his thoughts in countries like China and India, having no regard for anything near carbon neutrality, massive factories, industry that's powered by fossil fuel? So is it not all slightly pointless for us to go as green as we can when they seemingly are not bothered?
Yeah, I mean, this is a classic argument that people put, isn't it? What's the point of us doing anything if China doesn't, right? Well, the first thing to say is China is doing massive amounts in renewable energy, way more than we are, actually. I mean, they do have 1 billion people in their country as well, and they are on an earlier point of the development path than we are here. So, they've got some industrialization to get out of their system, let's say. But if you look at what they're doing and the commitment and the progress they're making, I would say it's better than ours. But in any event, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do anything. Even if China were doing nothing, it doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything. We should take responsibility for what we are responsible for, which is our own emissions. Our own emissions.
But we are doing things, aren't we?
Well, I mean, you talked about the Tory manifesto 2019 and how it was an absolute commitment. Look at the other things that were in the manifesto that were absolute commitments that didn't get stuck by. There's nothing in the Tory manifesto.
But that's a bait and switch. We're talking about this. The government have put a manifesto in place.
They have.
There's no example of them not sticking to that 2050 manifesto. Your movement is suggesting it needs to be moved forward to 2030. So with that in mind, we can debate the vagaries and peculiarities of it. And we debated the last time you were on about the various levies on utility bills, and however they diminish and however they're being reduced, there is still a levy, and people are acutely aware, and the subject matter is of discussion, and it is being featured on platforms like Sky, where they have Climate Watch on a regular feature on their channel. So the objective of the aim is being achieved, and now we're moving into territory where maximum disruption and reckless behaviour is a stable diet because it gets media attention, and that's a space where I believe that you don't have the right to be operating the way you are.
Reckless behaviour, Dale?
Well, look,
running on a racetrack, Dale, is reckless behaviour, and you will know it.
Let me finish, and you might hear me agree with you. I can see the argument there. Absolutely, it's dangerous, right? It's a risk, and I think those people did that. They're brave, and they did it because they believe passionately that not enough is being done. We cannot believe in the Tory manifesto. There are a couple of key planks of that already have been abandoned. So take a look at it, right? And the money that is on our bills for green levies, actually, 1/3 of that money that everybody refers to as green levies is social levies for the fuel poor. But if you,
still an awareness,
to be clear, right? We just bumped £2 billion into the North Sea just a few months ago, right? That money doesn't appear on your energy bill.
Still an awareness, though, isn't it?
So we don't see it. Right, but what the government have done, which is a very bad thing to do, is to ring fence green costs and make them very visible. Like, we put $2 billion into farming, you don't find it on your bill at the supermarket checkout. We put $2 billion into trains, you don't see it on your train ticket price because it's not there.
Dale,
we pay from general taxation.
Are aware of it.
Dale, from that to this, before you go, and time is running away. You lost your goalkeeper, Rod Edwards. Your former boss, your former manager, Rob Edwards, to Watford. They came in and pinched him.
Yeah.
Have you forgiven them?
Not yet. I probably will.
You were not happy when your manager Rob Edwards
only the means of it,
jumped
though,
ship.
right? The means of it. No, I mean, I didn't begrudge Rob a move. It was the secrecy, the behind the back stuff. It was done in a bad way, and I said that at the time. It was the manner of the doing of it that was wrong.
Have you made up with Rob? Have you spoken to him?
I haven't spoken to him again, but I won't hold a grudge.
Okay, Dale, you believe passionately in your cause, and I know you do, and that's why you came in to join us this morning. We do appreciate it.
No, I appreciate being here, guys. I love coming here and having a chat to both of you.
Thank you. Both of us.
They're
That's
both
good
of you.
to know,
Absolutely, absolutely.
Dale Vince, much appreciate it.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.